what was once sacred to the Red Indians or to the South American Indians is now causing lung cancer and sickness. So it's not necessarily per se that the plant or the substance itself will be good in itself. I think by far the most important aspect of whether something will be healing or not is the context and the approach and the intention within which the substance is being used. Well, you know, I don't think lung cancer existed amongst the Red Indian people, not that I've heard of anyway. And yet it's rife in our society today because it's done in an unconscious way. It's not being respected as a sacred herb. It's just being used as a drug, as a drug of addiction, and one to pacify the emotions, suppress the emotions, keep doing your job. And in the same way that coffee and alcohol are also being used. And I think that if you were to commodify marijuana, the same thing could happen again. I mean, in the sense that it could become, if you take these plants, as I said, it's a relationship you have with these plants. And the most important thing about these plants is the relationship with the plant. And if it's a conscious relationship, it's going to be of great benefit. But if it's an unconscious relationship, I think the opposite could also be true. And we have evidence of that with the tobacco and the alcohol and many other things that are used in that way today. So I think just the fact that it's socially sanctioned is good in the sense that it's no longer illegal, but the next step to be taken is that it has to be conscious and fully intentionalized, the use of it, and that it has to come with education, and that education has to be there to acknowledge that plants are living beings, not just a commodity to be ingested, not just another thing to be used for self-gratification. That in fact it is a relationship, and in any relationship one has to give as much as receive. And if you're receiving benefits from these plants, then one must give in return as well. One must give of oneself. And I think that is the inbuilt determination of whether something will be a healthy relationship or not, just as it will be between two human beings. We've seen you can see lots of examples of dysfunctional relationships between human beings. You can also see very positive and wonderful relationships between human beings. So I think it comes down to intention and awareness.
I'm just wondering, does anyone have any thoughts then? That brings up the idea of what Tim Leary called in the 60s set and setting. You know, that it's not just the chemicals that we're taking or the substances, it's the environment we do these things in, it's the headspace we're bringing to that experience, it's how comfortable we feel. There is more things going on than just the neurochemistry in a pill or in a substance. And this idea about, as you say, Delphine, the relationship that you have, do you think that we can have these relationships with MDMA and with LSD just as we can perhaps with ayahuasca? Is anyone, or the plants?
I published an article in the Sydney Morning Herald about 25 years ago called Are Plants Experimenting with Humans? And that was at the height of the drug war, and the lawyers in the Sydney Morning Herald went through literally every word there, trying to make sure that there wasn't any encouragement to take psychedelics or psychotropic drugs. And what I did in that article, and it's available on my blog, is that I kind of foresaw a time when psychedelic medicine would be taught at high school, starting with about grade 9, where kids would be issued this kind of lab kits, you know, and you'd have about 60 different vials of different extracts, super diluted extracts, so that even at that time, in future time, when we're going to get rational, that you still won't get arrested because they're not actually potent to the point of being kind of a street drug. And there will be guides who come from different areas of the world via video or whatever that will teach children about what these plants mean, and kids would then, with some kind of a meditation technique, take up and begin to develop some kind of a rapport, inner rapport with that particular substance, and see if it's ayahuasca for one and something else for somebody else, you know, how do they resonate with that particular substance. And so then their education, their journey would begin, because, you know, you talk about dangers of drugs, but, you know, kids are taking drugs now. Probably also the most dangerous activity you'll ever teach your kids is something like driving a car. That is the most lethal kind of exercise that you're going teach anybody to do. So it has to be taught, and it's going to be a very sophisticated and lengthy process of how to teach people and how to create the right kind of set and setting, which to me will be developed by top guides or researchers in conjunction with the communication with the living plant. And as we progress around that path, the understanding of set and setting is going to change, and that can be conveyed then to people who are going to do it for the first time.
This makes me think, because I know MAPS is pioneering these studies as well, not just in trial studies with the substances, but in teaching the therapists how to prepare to use the substance or to even take the substance themselves, like they did in the 50s and 60s, so they would know the terrain, the territory the patients are going through. And as that frequency comes back into Western medicine, we're also seeing this more underground, but the shamanic perspective, which has the same type of container. It has a container of the ceremony and of the circle and the practitioner, and it is medicine as well. And it's like they're paralleling and working at both ends of the problem of the culture. And actually Gabor Mate, who is one of the doctors in the film, who's done an amazing amount of work in his career with addictions and looking at the root causes of addictions, and he was saying in the film that, it's almost Western culture is addicted to almost everything. It's like TV addiction, internet addiction, sex addiction, power addiction, coffee, alcohol. We're all addicted, and at the root of that addiction, underneath the addiction, it's filling this wound and this thing that needs to be healed. And so Western medicine seems to be coming around to the idea of psychedelics on one level, but there's an even deeper reservoir of this resurgence of the shamanic container of the ceremony to work at both ends of the culture, because it seems like Western culture has PTSD. It seems like there's global PTSD on some level. So what do you think of this idea of shamanism as one half of the equation of psychedelic medicines? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a great question, thank you. Coming from a grassroots approach, I know from the wisdom of the plants themselves and through sittings that the tradition that's come from the forests, that's come from direct transmission with the plants, from generations of reverence and practice and learning and transmissions, that we need in our evolution to keep the ancient cultures alive, that it's a really significant thread in this transitory phase that we're in. It's a part of the weaving that bridges us with science, bridges us with theory and knowledge and chemistry. A lot of the time in the cultures in the forests, for example, the people are running around barefoot, they know what foods to eat, they know when they get a bite, what plant to put on the bite. They have an immediate, direct relationship with their highest intelligence and with how to integrate the epiphanies that they're experiencing. And I believe that what's essential here as we evolve in the West is bringing the wisdom of the integration into the practice. Shamanic work, when held with the highest of integrity, offers that guidance. It's not the same as just taking a pill. There's a very intricate and intimate language involved, and shamanism allows for that transmission.
Yeah, I also think there is a resurgence of the shamanic paradigm, a neo-shamanism that is very timely at this point, because you're right, the world is in a sort of a global PTSD. What we're looking at when we look at the news or the television is a mind run amok, and it's an insane mind that seems to be prevalent on this planet today. And I think a lot of that is due to the profound alienation and the profound separation that has happened from the separation of our cultures from, as I said in the movie, from spiritual, from source, or from nature. And that a lot of the messages that are coming through the plants, the visionary plants like ayahuasca, or the mushrooms, or the cactus, is that it's promoting or engendering a new sense of connectedness within the circle of the ceremony. The circle of the ceremony is like a symbol of wholeness, of validation, where each person within that circle finds their place, and there is no hierarchy. It's not a pyramid, it's a circle, and the circle is unbroken. And I think this has an intrinsically healing effect apart from the plants. I mean, people are coming together in circles all over the planet, whether they're using plants or not. And I think there's a profound truth in that. That is, when people find their place in a circle, in a community, or in a tribe, or in a neo-pod of connected people, one finds self-validation, one finds self-empowerment through that kind of connectedness. Whereas if you're living in an urban situation, which is the case in virtually every city in the world, people barely know who their next door neighbour is. People go to work as automatons. They're not really connected, and they're in a hierarchical structure in which they're scrabbling to get further above, and not really caring about the downline, so to speak, of the people below. And so that's what's being promoted by modern society, and I think that profound alienation causes mental illness, causes the kind of psychic and emotional and mental diseases that are so commonplace today, for which, and the reason why SSRIs are so heavily prescribed, because they're nothing more than a basic, a band-aid on that kind of thing. But when you go into the circle, and the way that these plants are being reintroduced into the Western psyche is through the circle, I think that there is an innate healing that happens just by coming together in circle, just by sitting with your brothers and sisters in circle. There is a validation that occurs that is very deep. And the plants are a catalyst within that circle. They're teachers within that circle, but it's the circle itself which is healing. And I feel that this neo-shamanic paradigm is something that I feel is just, we're in transition and it's just emerging, like it's being introduced to the West, reintroduced to the Western psyche again, but it hasn't fully solidified here. But in my dream, or in my vision, I see a future society of interconnected, highly independent pods that are cybernetically connected through the technology, where each pod is self-determining, and each pod is determined, completely makes up how they are. The children are not just the products of their parents, but they are the responsibility of the tribe, of the pod, as it was in the old tribal way. But many people have felt the healing aspect of that and have reinterpreted that as going back. We've got to go back to how the tribes were and go, and eschews technology. But I see technology as being a very important, very powerful part of it. That it is actually also an evolutionary driver in itself, used with consciousness, used in the right way. It's being used in a way to control right now, but it can just as easily be used in a way to liberate consciousness. And so I think that we're on the road to a neo-shamanism, a neo-shamanic tribal paradigm that is very high-tech and very technological, and that we bring that principle into, and drawing all of the learnings and the inheritances that we've got from those ancient shamanic paradigms into one universal, high-tech, neo-shamanic paradigm.
Global psychedelic democracy. I love it. Okay, I would like to ask the audience, do you have any questions or anything you'd like to share about this idea of psychedelics as medicine? Byron Bay, this is your chance. Anyone? Put your hand up. I'll come up to you with the mic.
I have a question specifically for Piotr. It relates to Gordon Wasson's book, Mushrooms, Russia and History, in which he explored the cultural acceptance of, let's call it mycophagia, compared to the West, where revelatory experiences through plant means were suppressed by the church and the state. I wonder if you could comment on that. And an open question to the panel that relates to Timothy Leary's concept of the fifth freedom, which he outlined in his book, The Politics of Ecstasy, in which no man should be prevented with just cause to explore his own consciousness, and it should not necessarily be mediated by the state.
Yeah, Gordon Wesson was a tight banker, and he was fortunately married to a Russian lady called Valentina. And she loved mushrooms, and affinity was really for edible mushrooms, not psychedelic ones. But through that, Gordon Wesson was perhaps the first Western researcher who actually partook of the ceremony, both in Siberia and then later on in Mexico with the psilocybin mushrooms, and described it all in his famous article in 1957 in the Life magazine, which created a huge sensation at the time, caused people to come to the Mexican village, hippies and other people who were experimenting, to the point that it caused disruption of local culture. That tells you the question there, how sensitive the whole thing is, so that the curandera, who was actually taking Gordon on that experience, she was banished from the village and her house was burned. So it's not an easy thing to do, but obviously in the same way in which Amanita Mascari, and where I had a personal connection, was my uncle was first in NKVD, which is Soviet sort of secret police, and then he became very sick. And at the end of the 50s, he went to Kamchatka, where cults of Amanita Mascari were prevalent, and he was treating himself with Amanita, using the local wisdom, and he actually recovered and became one of the leading traders of plants, selling them to Japan. So, you know, same as ayahuasca and all that, there's obviously deep cultural connection in different points of the world. But I'll finish by saying where I see the future. You know, you see the future in the interconnected, technologically advanced, neo-shamans and all that. That's possible, and I want that too. I mean, Project Nevana, I postulated a future like that, but at the same time, I just got news that 60,000 Chinese users were arrested virtually overnight on the new crackdown on drug use in China. This is like Nixon on steroids. And if you have read the book by Ben Elton, High Times, he goes into the nitty-gritty of actual social reaction, you know, of the police, of the drug syndicates, to something like a, you know, interference in their very powerful networks. The results are not straightforward. In my book, I won't give you everything away, but you come to the point of Third World War as a result of mass introduction of psychedelic substances in a society. Fortunately, we averted, I'll give you the good line, you know, we're not going to be destroyed. But that's how difficult and sensitive and dangerous the whole thing as it develops will become. So it's like a Manichaean battle of good and evil, you know, yin and yang and black and white. And I'm on the side of the, you know, psychedelic plants winning the battle, but it won't be straightforward.
So does anyone on the panel have anything about the second question there that was asked about politics of consciousness and the rights, the inherent rights we should have as, you know, democratic citizens to control our consciousness if it's not hurting anyone else? Do we have an inbuilt right to be as conscious as our evolution allows us to be? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, we do have the right. And again, coming back to grassroots, it's as simple as taking cuttings, putting plants in the earth, developing a relationship, feeling what you're called to, seeking guidance, reading, meditating, doing the practices. And grassroots, we can always uphold our natural right to evolve. We can't always wait for somebody else to give us permission. I'm not talking about an aggressive rebellion, I'm talking about having a direct connection with your own garden. That is the Garden of Eden, that's Earth.
Do you have any questions from the audience? David?
I like what you said about acknowledging plants as living beings, but I take it a step further and saying that they're conscious, they're highly conscious. In fact, their consciousness is very involved. It's something to do with the fact that translating the sun's codons directly, and there's no intermediary. What I found almost by accident is that you can access that consciousness without actually consuming the plant. It's possible. And I used to laugh at the idea of vegetalistas who can talk to plants, but I'm beginning to accept that it is possible. And I've been doing that the past year, and what I've discovered is that they're actually, they're trying to tell us that the globe, the Earth, Gaia is in shock. Actually, there's a war going on, and there's these entities that actually, you talk about the corporate mentality and corporate non-governance, Well, it goes a bit deeper than that, and they've shown me there's actually like almost a war going on, and that they want us to help. And I was shown that in Peru, and I was shown again here in Australia. So just wondering what your view is on that.
And I'll formulate that into a question. If Gaia herself has PTSD, can humans do something to help her? Can we secrete some substance from our own neurochemical networking psychedelic democracy across the planet? Can we help our mother? Anyone? Panelists?
But Rak, we're not separate from the mother. That's been the whole problem from the beginning, that we think we can save the planet, we can save this, we can save that. It's just called human ego. The only real and humble thing that we can do is save ourselves. That's the truth. And in doing so, I think we establish an affinity with the mother in resonance in the quality of healing. But we've got to get off this high horse of thinking that we have to save the planet. We are the problem. We're the walking, talking, moving, self-cogitating aspects of Gaia that through our awareness of self-consciousness, which is both a blessing and a curse, we're still having that, oh, we fucked up the planet, now we've got... But, you know, realize that we are it. As you said in your movie, we are it from it. And that means we don't have to save it. We are it. We just have to become conscious of us and through ourselves to all of our environment to just become more conscious. That's it.
Beautiful. Byron Bay, do we have any more questions? Surely. Of course. We'll wait over to the other side.
Just a general question to the panel. I've just finished reading a book you might have read called Zigzag Zen, which looks at the relationship between psychedelics and Buddhism over the last few decades. And having experimented with both myself, one thing I noticed was that learning meditation was a very good grounding with psychedelics in terms of being able to ground the mind in the experience. Just wondered if you had any ideas on how those two relate. Do psychedelics lead to a meditative path, or does a meditative path, can that incorporate psychedelics, or are they mutually exclusive? Any thoughts on that one?
I have something to say about that. I think it's very connected. I think it's intimately interwoven, so there's no this or that. They're not, it's which came first, the chicken or the egg. When we are authentic in our exploration and our relationship with the plants, it invokes a natural state, an innate state of being in the stillness, in the deepness, which is a path to meditation. Meditation is actually an innate state, so as children we're quite familiar with it. And as far as Buddhism goes, one of my first teachers came from the realm of crazy wisdom, and he brought Buddhism into the plants quite strongly. The benefits for me are ongoing, and it's the bodhisattvic path is something that I find is highly and deeply symbiotic with the plants. If the intention of the person is for evolution, for growth, for personal healing and awakening, then symbiosis is exquisite. But it's not necessarily everybody's path. It's not a necessity, but it can be a blessing if the person feels a calling towards that.
Anyone, Byron? Any question? I'd like to throw one to the audience then. Maybe just for everyone on the panel. We're seeing this resurgence in psychedelic medicines and in shamanic medicines across the planet, as we've discussed. What do you think individually is the best path forward, like from your different disciplines, and what is some of the ways that you think are what's happening, like at the cutting edge, or what's been happening with the lobbying or the government or the medicinal or the shamanic? What is either needed or what is happening? What's the best path you see forward in relation to psychedelic medicines and or shamanic modalities?
Where's that path going? What are we achieving?
Well, it's happening, it's evolving, but what is the best way to travel in that path, Steve? Like, do we lobby the governments? Do we just do it ourselves?
It's a really good question, Rak. I've come to believe that the best path is to go down all the paths. It's interesting to see what Rick Doblin's been doing with MAPS in the USA, where he made a really conscious decision You know, he was an advocate of MDMA. He discovered it in the 80s, realised its healing potential and wanted to be a therapist who used MDMA, and then about a year later the government made it illegal. So he made a really conscious decision to go down the formal government structured approval path and, you know, seek to research it as a medicine. And he's achieved a lot in that time, you know, and I kind of see it as a bit of a pincer movement. If I can draw on my military experience, which I'm not sure is entirely appropriated by Byron Bay, but you know, one common tactic is to actually go around both sides and meet in the middle. You know, if you're trying to capture a hill or something. And I think, you know, that's what I see is happening. Folks are going down the traditional shamanic path, and they're going to Peru and learning, you know, the ancient knowledge and that kind of stuff, and then that's exploding all over the world. The scientists are going down the scientific path. We've got wonderful people like Dennis McKenna, who was in the film there, you know, who's an ethnopharmacologist, so he's formally studied how people use plants as medicines. And Dennis has a wonderful story, which is his theory that, you know, the earth has got out of balance. Maybe that's our fault. Maybe it's just part of the natural process, but now he says the plants are coming out of the Amazon and they're spreading all over the world, and they're changing our consciousness to bring things back into balance again. You know, and that's from a scientist. And then you've got, you know, people like Rick who are going through this sort of government policy route and lobbying and helping people in government realise that, hey, these are actual medicines and they ought to be allowed. So I see advances happening on all fronts in all ways, and I think that's a really great way to do it. I think if we just tried to do it one way, then it would be much easier to block it.
I think it was Einstein that said, you cannot solve a problem within the paradigm within which it was, you know, presented or conceived. In other words, you've got to go beyond the box. What we're seeing on the planet today is an endgame sociologically, politically, environmentally, on every level that we look at. People trying to fix the planet, and in their attempts to fix it are inadvertently creating more and more problems. So the answer seems to be a quantum leap beyond the box to get a new, what Ilya Prigogine called the theory of dissipating structures, whereby when it's a structure that has a certain inherent problem within it gets so stressed by that problem, it just dissolves or dissipates and reorganizes on a higher frequency or a higher level, within which that element that was considered a problem is no longer a problem, but is part of a new coherent form of that new paradigm. And so I see that the only solution to the dilemma that we find ourselves in is the radical transformation of consciousness. And the radical transformation of consciousness seems to be supported by many modalities on the planet today. One of the most powerful of which, although it's not for everybody, I believe is other plants. And it's no coincidence that in the last 20 years, when I started working with ayahuasca 20 years ago, when I would give the medicine to people, I would have to talk for an hour to talk about its history, its usage, where it comes from, what the components are, and so on and so forth. Now it's everywhere. A mere 20 years later, it's all through the Western psyche. Even if you've never taken ayahuasca, people have heard about it. There are documentaries, there are films, there are books, there are people joining in circles all over the West now. And that's just in a very short period of time. Because in my experience, I've followed a lot of different pathways in my lifetime, or explored many, but the ayahuasca experience is the fastest way that I've yet come across to unload karma, to simply unload stuff that we've been carrying around since childhood and in many instances for lifetimes. And that we're carrying around these psychic dead horses, not even aware that we're carrying them. And I'm talking here collectively on a national level as well as individually, on an individual level. And ayahuasca, in the catharsis of the purge, allows you to physically, psychically, mentally and emotionally dispel this toxicity that we've developed, that's been inside of us. And it's just fast, because there are many other pathways. I've studied in many other pathways. And we just don't have time to go and sit in a cave and meditate on the third eye for 7 years and hope to become enlightened or whatever. It's time to wake up now. And there is no enlightenment like pie in the sky. It's just becoming conscious and being here now. And I think this is the message that the plants are delivering. Some people come to ayahuasca looking for a trip, looking for some sort of experience where they can go beyond, or curiosity seekers or thrill seekers, but mostly people are coming to open themselves and to release unwanted patterns, unwanted tendencies, habits, things that we've been carrying around that are part of our conditioning process. And ayahuasca is like a WD-40. It takes you spray it on, and all the rusty bits of that machinery that makes up the process of our conditioning starts to become undone, which is why it is inherently subversive, and why it is probably being resisted on the level of governments and nations, because it is subversive. It undoes the machinery of conditioning and reconnects you to Gaia, which is where we've been a part of all along. And in so doing, it's contributing in a very powerful way to the radical transformation of consciousness that are happening in the world today. I think that's the only solution, is to dissipate the old structure and reorganize on a higher frequency. That's, to me, what seems to be the answer to that.
Definitely resonates for me. On a personal level, that's my journey, is to simply experience this existence from another dimension. I'm really content to believe that illusion falls away. It's not my path to advocate this as legal or illegal, because already it's my innate right to practice my relationship with the plants and to continue the learning and the growth, the evolution. I also believe that what we're doing now, dialogue, authenticity, sitting in a place of not knowing with exploration, storytelling, and bringing in the awakenings of mythology that come through, exploring the human condition, all of these ways that we're looking with transparency at what's occurring as our neurons switch on, and as we become something we've never experienced being before. So complementary to that are those who feel the calling to be in the medical arena, to be in the labs, to explore the chemical components and to express and explain. I think temporarily that's a significant part of this journey. And ultimately we'll all find ourselves sitting in a very grassroots manner back on the earth, in our the gentleness of just being human in our small communities and in our communities at large. And I believe in the higher intelligence of the plants, and that if we are constantly self-regulating, checking ourselves for our intention and our action, that and we become basically flutes or vehicles or instruments for something very beautiful that wants to birth through us and within us, then that will simply happen. All we need to do is fine-tune ourselves as the instruments through which consciousness is awakening.
It's a beautiful vision coming with it. That is what I feel the plants are taking us to, is what is being created. How we get there, I personally work on an integrated model where I first take responsibility that I grow my own plants. I have that ability. This is very simple. And then I work on a different level where my community here needs plants. So I find ways to get community things from the cannabis plants. Then I work on a state level, where I work with a wider community. I also work with state government. I also work very closely with the federal government. I work closely with federal governments around the world and state governments around the world. I work with, yesterday I was working with a pharmaceutical company to see how they can bring whole plant medicines in Australia. I work on all different levels because we're all different. There's many different perspectives, and I don't judge people's paths and how they get to this vision that I know is true within myself. I believe in creating alternatives, options, the ability for people to make that choice. Because not everyone is as lucky as we are. We have access to these medicines. We can get them, we can connect with them. And there's a lot of people that want to connect with these medicines, have been called to connect with these medicines and just haven't made that connection yet. And sometimes it gets, we have to get to what is seemingly extreme to me and sell lollies with cannabis in, sweets and stuff and gummy bears, which, there's pros and cons to it. And I've been in Colorado and I've seen the negative effects, and personally I don't agree personally that that's a great way to give people access to these things, but having it accessible in different forms is just another method. Ultimately, we all make our own decisions on how we get there. We all have a choice. There are many people in the world who seemingly have no choices, and yet they're the ones that inspire me to remind me that we always have a choice. Thank you for choosing plants.
When I wrote about 4 years ago the first draft of Project Nevana, I thought I was going to change the world. And I tried, just as a writer and a translator and a mediator, to interfere and intervene in the process, which was happening after plants were banned. Right now, I think I find that I'm suffering from the effects of multi-generational PTSD, beginning of going all the way down to my clan. And I'm feeling something from the Gaia, as you say. And so my tack now is to really reconnect again with plants, because I haven't taken anything for about 30 years, except maybe for green tea. So I've been very, very clean, and my system is primed now for some kind of a new experience. I believe that meditation, I've been doing meditation for a long time. I've fallen off the wagon for a while, but I've gone back to Vipassana now. And I think psychedelically catalyzed meditation, when you use psychedelics just to open up, and it's got to be different ones for different people at different times of life, and then sort of propel you on that path, could be an interesting path to explore. So I'm looking forward to be getting lucky again, as you said. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for all the panelists sharing their wisdom tonight. It's been a very illuminating panel. I always enjoy hearing the depth of our wisdom here in the community and of sharing that with the people out there. And also thanks to Dean Jeffries, who has been doing recordings of this, and this will be available on YouTube, and we'll go out to connect with the larger community. As the film did show, there are many organisations all across the world, many individuals pursuing, the legalisation of psychedelics and entheogens and the shamanic sort of substances for medicines and for healing. And if you wanted to know more, there are organisations like MAPS.org, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies in the US, a not-for-profit NGO helping lobby the governments and set up tests all over the world, not just in America, but all over the world. And as Steve McDonald said, there's PRISM. MAPS helped kickstart that into being, but Steve's one of the founders of that, the psychedelic research in science and medicine. And there's also an organisation called Entheogenesis Australis, which is here in Australia, based mainly in Melbourne. They have a conference which is December 6th this year, and it's a one-day conference in Melbourne with experts from all over Australia and internationally, talking about psychedelics as medicines and the shamanic plants and this cultural revival that is happening. And there is a rumour that there is also going to be a 2-day conference here in Byron Bay around February 6 and 7 or 7 and 8 at Starseed Gardens, which if you're interested, there will be more information coming out about that. So it's not going away. This movement is really on the rise, and as some people here have said, it's sort of a mashup between this archaic revival of very ancient ways of doing things and working with these medicines which the planet makes available to us, and these lab-based chemicals which can get out to the masses of people who do need them, who are, suffering from the PTSD in a sense that Western culture and consumerism is really affecting people and causing in people. And hopefully there are larger forces at work. And as Steve said, I like that analogy that it's not just that the psychedelic medicines are coming in, the shamanic medicines are coming in, and it's being worked at from every angle. And it is going to take all of us, as Darpan said, to work on ourselves. And then collectively, hopefully, we can help heal ourselves, and that will help heal the world. And so thank you so much for being part of Neurons to Nevana here in Byron Bay. And a round of applause for the panelists. Thank you. Does anyone on the panel have any links? Some links to you've got a book and prism.org? .au. Yeah. And Hemp Food Australia? Very good, very good. Okay, there we go.
It's an organisation that's just started called the Ethno-Botanical Stewardship Council, or ESC, doing some interesting work, very early days, and they're like a lot of organisations, they're still sort of finding their way, but they're putting together a global guide for the use of plant medicines in a sacred way, and they're also interested in fostering sustainability and safety with the use of plant medicines all around the world. So they've got a crowdfunder on at the moment, Ethno-Botanical Stewardship Council. I'm not sure their web address, I'm sorry, but if you go to my web address or our web address, prism.org.au, there's a link on the homepage.
And also maybe just a round of applause for the director of the film, Oliver Hockenhull, and Mangusta Productions. They're the team from who've brought us Neurons to Nevana and all these experts to get this message out there to the wider world. So thank you to Mangusta Productions and the Neurons to Nevana team. Over.